You didn't do anything, and that's exactly what's undoing them. Something is burning in a direction you may not be fully looking, not loudly, not with the consuming visible heat of something that announces itself. More like the kind of fire that exists beneath ash, invisible from the surface, unmistakable the moment you get close enough to feel the warmth radiating upward through what looked, from a distance, like something already finished. Stay with this. Let it settle into you before you decide what to do with it. There is a specific kind of hunger that has nothing to do with weakness. It doesn't arrive in the predictable, manageable form of ordinary wanting, the kind that can be redirected, distracted, filed away under the category of things that will pass with enough time and enough distance. It arrives instead as something considerably more inconvenient. Something that doesn't respond to logic or strategy or the very reasonable decision to simply stop feeling it. Something that moves through the walls. A person builds around themselves with the patient, unhurried certainty of water finding its way through stone, not forcing, not rushing, simply persisting, because persistence is the only language it knows. And somewhere in the landscape of your life, something like that may be moving quietly without permission toward you. Mm, I want to be precise here because precision matters in a space like this one. I cannot tell you with certainty what lives inside another person, what they feel, what they want, what they lie awake holding in the hours when the performance of the day has finally been set down. What I can tell you is what intense attraction does to a person from the inside. What it looks like when something has taken hold of someone in a way they neither planned nor entirely welcomed. Because it's possible, it is genuinely possible that the description will land somewhere specific for you, that something in you will recognize the shape of it even without a name attached. This reflection invites you to consider, have you ever felt in the particular way that the body registers things before the mind has finished constructing its arguments, that someone's attention toward you carries a weight that their words or their carefully maintained composure have been working to conceal? Because intense attraction is rarely quiet in the body, even when it is disciplined in its expression, it leaks. Through the specific quality of attention, the kind that notices things it had no practical reason to notice. Through the way time moves differently in certain proximities. Through the particular texture of a silence between two people that is not empty but charged, dense, with something neither person has named, but both can feel pressing against the edges of the ordinary conversation happening on top of it. Picture a river being held behind a dam. The dam is deliberate, carefully constructed, maintained with considerable effort, built from the very reasonable understanding that some things, once released, cannot be recalled. The water behind it is not still, it is never still. It moves constantly against its own containment, finding the small fractures, pressing into them, not destructively but persistently, the way feeling always presses against the structures built to contain it. Because feeling, unlike water, doesn't actually care about the engineering of the dam. It simply continues to be what it is, fully, without apology, without any interest in the inconvenience it creates. Some of you watching this have been on the receiving end of a dam, have felt the pressure of something contained, not expressed, not released, but present in the specific way that only contained things are present. The awareness that something is being held back carefully with effort in your proximity. And that awareness is its own particular experience, not entirely comfortable, not entirely unpleasant, existing in that strange and charged middle space between what is felt and what is said, between what is wanted and what is permitted, between the pull of something real and the architecture of whatever has been constructed to manage it. uh, this reflection invites you to consider, what does it feel like in your body to be wanted with an intensity that the other person hasn't fully allowed themselves to express? And what does that specific, unspoken, wanting ask of you in return? Because being craved, really craved, not in the shallow, easily satisfied way of ordinary attraction, but in the deeper, more inconvenient way of something that has gotten beneath the surface of a person and refuses to be dislodged. Being craved, like, that is not a simple experience to navigate. It carries weight. It creates a particular kind of responsibility, even when nothing has been explicitly said, even when the craving exists entirely in the space between words rather than in any direct expression of it. Because you feel it, and feeling it means you are, in some sense, already inside the dynamic, already implicated in something that is happening, whether or not it has been named. And here is where it gets interesting. Here is where the reading turns from what may be true about someone else's interior landscape to what is definitely true about yours. Because the question that actually matters here is not how intense their attraction is, or how long they've been carrying it, or what they plan to do with it. The question that matters is what you do with the knowledge of it, how you sit with the specific weight of being wanted that much. Whether it activates something in you, and if so, what warmth or discomfort or the complicated mixture of both that tends to arrive when something touches a place that hasn't been touched in a while. Mm. Some of you have been managing your own response to this very carefully, containing your awareness of it, keeping it at a certain distance, processing it in small, controlled increments rather than allowing yourself to feel its full weight all at once. And the management makes sense. The management is intelligent. There are very good reasons why a person might choose to stay slightly removed from the experience of being intensely desired, particularly if previous experiences of being desired have been complicated or painful, or have carried costs that weren't apparent until much later. But management, sustained long enough, has a way of becoming its own kind of distance, not from the other person, from yourself. From the part of you that has a genuine response to this, that feels something real when it allows itself to feel, that deserves to be listened to rather than strategically managed into something more comfortable and less revealing. This reflection invites you to consider, what is your actual unmanaged response to the knowledge that someone is craving you with an intensity they can't fully contain? And what does that response tell you about what you want beneath the careful architecture of what you've decided to want? Let me tell you what craving at its most intense does to the person experiencing it. It narrows the world. not dramatically, not in the way of obsession, which is something different and considerably less interesting, but quietly, persistently, in the specific way that a particular frequency, once heard, makes itself audible everywhere. The person being craved becomes a kind of tuning fork for the one doing the craving, present in the texture of ordinary moments, in the quality of attention given to unrelated things, in the specific ache of absence that makes itself known precisely when the surrounding circumstances are most ordinary, most unremarkable, most stripped of the distraction that usually keeps the interior landscape from becoming too loud. You have become that frequency for someone, not a concept, not an idea, not a memory that can be managed into something smaller with enough time and enough distance. A specific, irreplaceable, entirely particular frequency that no substitute has been able to replicate because genuine attraction, the kind that reaches beneath the surface and makes contact with something real, doesn't have substitutes. It has only the thing itself or the absence of the thing itself, and the absence for this person has been considerably louder than anything that has arrived to fill it. This reflection invites you to consider what would it mean for you, not for the situation, not for any potential outcome, but for the private and interior experience of being you, to fully receive the knowledge that someone finds you irreplaceable in this specific, visceral, entirely unstrategic way. Because receiving that knowledge, really receiving it without immediately deflecting it or minimizing it or processing it into something more manageable, requires something. It requires a willingness to occupy your own worth without apology, to let the fact of being wanted that specifically, that intensely, that involuntarily mean something, to resist the familiar reflex of making yourself smaller in the face of something that is, at its core, an acknowledgement of how large you actually are, how much space you take up in the interior landscape of someone who tried and failed to make you smaller in their own mind. The power is yours. It always has been. Not the power to manage what someone else feels or to determine the trajectory of an attraction that has its own momentum and its own intelligence, but the power to decide consciously from the solid ground of someone who knows what they carry and what they're worth, how to move in relation to something that is craving you badly enough to be inconvenient, badly enough to press against its own containment, badly enough to make itself felt across whatever distance currently exists between you. Their attraction to you is intense. They can't resist you. They're craving you badly. Not eventually, already, in the unremarkable hours of their ordinary days, in the specific and persistent way that genuine, involuntary, deeply inconvenient attraction makes itself known to the person carrying it, whether or not they have chosen to carry it, whether or not they would have chosen this if choosing had been an option. Trust yourself with this. The fact that you are wanted this specifically, this involuntarily, this intensely, that is not a coincidence. It is not flattery. It is the entirely predictable result of someone coming into contact with something they were not prepared to encounter and finding, to their considerable inconvenience, that they cannot put it down. Before you go, I want to hear from you in the comments. What does it feel like in your body to be wanted with an intensity that the other person struggles to contain? And does that feeling bring you closer to yourself, or does it create a distance between you and your own response that you're still trying to understand? And what is the one thing about being craved that you find most difficult to simply receive without deflecting or managing it into something smaller? Drop it below. I read every single one, and this space holds all of it without judgment. See you in the next one, and listen. The fact that they can't stop means something, not about what happens next, about what is already true right now, in this moment, in the specific and irreversible way that real things are true. Take care.